Hi, everybody. We're going to jump right into the top 25 highest priced cards from the 1989 Upper Deck set. You see that there's a lot of data on the page. I'll take you through that during the course of the video. If the thing you care about most is the price, well, that's the big green number right at the top. In this case, this Dale Murphy card has been selling for about 50 bucks in recent auctions. And this is the corrected version. Those of you familiar with the set will know that there is a reverse negative version. We will see that much later in this countdown. The PSA data at the bottom, I'll go through in some detail with other examples, but basically I pulled the total number of cards that have been graded for this particular type of card, the number of cards that got a grade of 10 from PSA, calculated the percentage, and put the number of verified auctions that PSA tallies on their auction results website. So in this case, the corrected version of the Dale Murphy card has been sent in for grading 567 times. 235 have gotten a PSA 10, that's 41%, and there have been 95 auctions of any grade of this card. Number 24 here, Dave Righetti's, where you start to see some oddness. Righetti's obviously not a particularly collected player, but you notice that only 18 of his cards have ever been sent in for grading, 18 of this particular card, and 11 of them have gotten a PSA 10. That's telling you that these are, in all likelihood, dealers or very serious collectors who have a really good eye for condition of cards. 61% have been coming back at a grade 10. That's a very, very high number. There have only been 4 sales ever of this card, and the most recent price is around 50 bucks. Ricky Henderson's a little bit more typical for what you'd see. Again, 24% of his graded cards have been coming back at 10. That's a pretty average number, higher than some, but lower than others, as we'll see. Also getting about 50 bucks and 64 auctions total. The Mark McGwire card at number 22 is one of the more heavily graded cards from this set. You see over 1,200 have been submitted for grading. 14% of them have come back with a 10. And there have been 135 auction sales, which is a pretty big number too. Gregg Jefferies, his star rookie card, comes in at number 21, also selling for about $50. This one's also gotten about 40% graded into a 10. Probably, again, largely submitted by collectors who are thinking that he's going to be a star player, or he's a desirable player, and are getting a fairly high percentage of PSA 10s. Number 20, Don Mattingly, also coming in right around that $50 price point. And pretty typical here, 35% of the graded cards coming in at a 10, and there have been 69 auctions. Now, here's a really interesting case. 46 of these Tiger checklist cards have been sent in, featuring Hall of Famer Alan Trammell. 76% of them have come back as a PSA 10. That's a very, very high percentage. And I don't know if it indicates that the card is more likely to be produced in pristine condition, or if it's just very carefully selected by whoever was sending them in. Number 18 is Oral Hershiser, still around that $50 price point, which is kind of a magic price point, especially for some of these cards that haven't sold very many copies. You can see that this Hershiser has only sold 16 times. And how about this Dave Collins? There was only one auction sale on record, and only 11 cards have ever been submitted. 8 of them are PSA 10s, 73%, but again, only one has ever sold for 50 bucks. Here's one that sold a lot more, Ryan Sandberg, 49 auction sales. Still, just about half of his cards have been coming in at PSA 10, which is a pretty high percentage as well. These Upper Deck cards from 1989 were produced in very high quality, certainly for the time, very high quality. Even by today's standards, certainly not a low quality product. And so it's not really surprising that a lot of these cards have gotten a 10, especially by grading standards back then. Today, it's much harder to get a PSA 10, but back then, I think people looked at the 1989 Upper Deck and said, these cards are in such amazing condition to start with that they gave out a lot of 10s back then. Here's another hero from the 1988 World Series, Kirk Gibson, getting card number 666, and it actually ratchets up slightly to about $55. That's a really cool photo, obviously taken from Game 1 of the 1988 World Series. Number 14, Mike Schmidt, comes in at $60. Very similar stats to the Gibson card that we just saw. Now here's Dave Parker at $60. only 8 auction sales, and that 72% is a very high number for the fraction that's come out as a PSA 10. We're going to see some very different numbers coming up as we get higher in this count, and you'll see why. But we're going to get some significant changes coming up, particularly in the top 10 and top 5. Jamie Moyers at number 12, $60. Only one time has it ever been sold. Darryl Strawberry's been sold 21 times. Almost half of his cards have come back as a PSA 10, averaging about $70. This checklist card number 27 in the set, but it's a checklist for the 26 star rookie cards, one for each team, showing the front and the back here just because the back is kind of unusual. I'm not really sure why this card has been graded so many times. I guess maybe like many checklists, it's not typically preserved because it's not a card that really ends up in people's binders. Maybe it's one that collectors and dealers have said, we should get this one graded because it's hard to find in perfect condition. I'm not sure. Mike Harkey, he was one of those star rookies. Only 8 sales, but it's a pretty rare card, so it's getting $105 as an average price. Now, here's one of the cool Nolan Ryan cards of the set. This is the triple exposure card, and you can see right away a huge jump up in the number of cards that have been submitted for grading, well over 3,000, and there are 932 that have received a PSA 10 grade. That's 30%, which is a pretty typical percentage. There have been lots and lots of auction sales, 461. Nolan Ryan, very popular player. So at $145 price is a pretty fair market price compared to a lot of these other prices that are based on very few sales. But now let's take another quantum leap up. Randy Johnson's rookie card here, which is a star rookie card, over 36,000 submissions to PSA. So the Nolan Ryan card that we just saw had 3,200 submissions, and that was the highest we've seen. Randy Johnson's got more than 10 times as many submissions. See that it sold many times, but one of the interesting things is you see that the percentage of 10s is down to 15%. And there is an interesting question is why does that percentage get so low? I think there's a couple of answers for that. Number one is, as mentioned, PSA has become stricter with their grading over time. This is a card that has likely continued to be submitted for grading over the years, even up to current day. And so I think that the percentage is quite a bit lower and has probably dragged down the overall percentage. But the other reason is people are more likely to submit cards that may not be perfect because they're hoping for something that might get a 10 or even like a 9 might still represent an economic win in terms of being worth the cost of grading. People are more optimistic or more willing to take a chance on a card that could be worth a lot if it comes into a 10 condition. Here's another famous Nolan Ryan card from the set, one where he's throwing a football. And it's pretty similar numbers to the other Nolan Ryan card. We just saw it at number 8. Very similar number of overall submissions, percentage of 10s, number of auctions. Just a healthy card that people like to collect. All right, cracking into the top 5. We have an unusual entry here of the White Sox checklist card. That one's featuring Hall of Famer Harold Baines. And as you can see, it's only sold 5 times and has gotten a pretty high price as a result. Burt Blyleven, also a Hall of Famer. Similar story here, but very high percentage of those cards have gone for 10s, at 67%, and has only been sold 7 times. Just interesting. So a lot of those 10s must be in the hands of private folks who are not interested in selling. Gary Sheffield is one of the most graded cards from this set. He's obviously a very highly touted rookie at the time. Almost 10,000 have been submitted for grading. And again, that one's right around 30%, which is again, a very typical number. 82 sales, a very healthy $460 price. Number 2 is the infamous Dale Murphy reverse negative card. This is the reverse negative of the card we saw at number 25. If you look, for example, at his jersey, you can see that Atlanta is written backwards on there. And so this one has 1,000 submissions, 13% rate of getting PSA 10, and has sold 184 times. Now, just to remind you of what the corrected version looked like, there have been 567 submissions, 41% of them were graded in a PSA 10. So twice as many of the reverse negatives have been submitted for grading, and a lower percentage of them have come back as a PSA 10. Again, probably because people are more willing to submit a card that may not look perfect, or more willing to take a risk, or again, more willing to accept a 9 or even an 8 that may still carry significant value. Here we are at number 1. It should really be of no surprise to anyone. It's the Ken Griffey Jr. card number 1, his star rookie. Look at the number of submissions. Almost 120,000. Only 4,200 have come back a PSA 10. That's 3%. So about a tenth of the normal percentage we see for most other cards. And look at the number of auction sales, 17,338, which is way more than all the other cards on this countdown combined. And the number of cards that have been graded are quite a bit more than all the other ones combined. Makes sense, obviously. Highly desirable card. Some would say, the most desirable baseball card from the last 50 years. I think pretty easily. I would win a poll of that, I would think. And consequently, it's been submitted a ton. Pricing is very high and is supporting lots of submissions of those cards. Even an 8, even a 7, I think, is very much worth getting in terms of the cost for grading. And therefore, it's been submitted a lot. So just a few more stats on the PSA grading. As of this recording, there have been 221,000 cards from the 1989 Upper Deck set submitted to PSA for grading. Of those, just over half have been the Ken Griffey Jr. card, which is crazy. The second most submitted card was the Randy Johnson, which has 36,000 submissions. And you notice that the total number of cards getting a grade of 10 is almost 38,000. So that's 17% of the 221,000 total submissions that are getting a PSA 10 grade. But in the Griffey, you can see there are 4,232 grade 10s, which amounts to a minuscule 3.5% of the total number of cards submitted for Griffey. And again, that's because so many people are willing to accept a lower grade one. You can see that 8 is the most common grade, and then followed by 9. There are about 11 times as many 8s as there are 10s. Just pretty amazing. And in fact, if you take just 4 cards together, Ken Griffey Jr., Randy Johnson, Gary Sheffield, and John Smoltz, they account for 173,000 total submissions to PSA, which is 78% of the total submissions for this set. Really incredible. All right, there you have it. Special player, special card, special set. Hope you enjoy this dive into 1989 Upper Deck. Have a great rest of your day. See you soon.